Welcome. This short presentation will provide an introduction to some of the causes and consequences of the Satanic Panic of the 80s and 90s. I'll include a few case studies and a discussion of the sociological factors involved in the Satanic Panic. Finally, I will provide my thoughts on why the panic is still relevant today. This is Melvin Quinney, a single divorced father in Texas, which is unusual for the 80s. In 1991, he was convicted of indecency with a child and sentenced to 20 years in prison. Quinney is accused of being a satanic cult leader by his children. During his trial, it came out that Quinney's son John accused him of programming him to forget that his father was not only the leader of a satanic cult, but also that Quinney murdered and molested children in front of and including his own children. This is Damien Eccles, a teenager from a small town in Arkansas. Eccles was convicted of murder in 1994 and sentenced to death for the premeditated murder of 3 8-year-old boys. His family was extremely poor, one of the poorest in town, and well known for living in poverty. Locals say Eccles likes to wear black and listen to heavy metal. They call him scary. Locals accuse Eccles of being a satanic cult leader and taking part in ritual activity. Police claim he dismembered and tortured the boys as part of his satanic ritual activity and had some sort of orgy during the crime. This is Scott Waterhouse of Sanford, Maine. Waterhouse was convicted of the murder of a 12-year-old girl in 1984. He's universally described as weird and different. A local is quoted in the newspaper as saying that Waterhouse has a touch of the devil in him. Waterhouse was an admitted Satanist. He told anyone who would listen that he adhered to the Satanic Bible. Police claim that he might have been in a satanic cult, but likely wasn't the leader of the cult. Waterhouse was more of a follower. Locals also claim that he probably smokes marijuana. During the Satanic Panic of the 80s and 90s, there were thousands of accusations of satanic activity, abuse, murder, and various sexually deviant behaviors. Panics, regardless of the focus, witchcraft, satanic, or otherwise, follow predictable patterns. To start off, social anxiety has to be high. The reasons for the social anxiety will vary, but the anxiety is there, and a lot of people are trying to cope with their anxious feelings, but they're struggling to find relief. And then local rumors will begin to swirl as people discuss and come up with possible reasons and solutions for their anxiety. Casual gossip will spread, and the groundwork for a social panic is set. It becomes obvious to people that take part in the gossip that they shouldn't contradict the rumors. There could be consequences if they do. A fear develops, and those that might speak out that they might become the focus of the gossip and rumor themselves. Then the rumors need to move from the micro-local level to the macro level, like newspapers, radio, TV, big media. They need to begin reporting on the rumors. And that makes it a reportable story. And as the story begins to appear in media, this adds authority to the story. The idea is that the story must be credible if it's being reported on in the media. At this point, more authority figures add credibility to the rumor, which is now a story. Police officers, city mayors, maybe even eventually the president all start talking about the story and offering quotes to the media. Now that the media and authority figures are involved, it's just about impossible to speak out. The story kicks up a notch as money and prestige get involved. The panic starts to increase sales of newspapers, books, clicks on websites, blogs, social media outlets, and then power dynamics come into play. As with money and prestige comes influence, which people don't like to give up. The media and authority figures will become less and less likely to let go of the story, and at this stage you have a true panic on your hands. The American origins of satanic cult activity, which is sometimes just called ritual cult activity, can be traced to the residual trauma of the Salem witch trials. After Salem, witchcraft accusations become local, transforming back into something more like rumor and gossip, and accusations become unofficial. There's no legal ramification associated with a witchcraft accusation. And eventually, rumors and gossip transform into folk tales and urban legend and minor panics. And over time, minor moral panics that seem to be unrelated to witchcraft pop up. So, an example is the anti-Mason movement of the 1820s. It's a small scale moral panic that happens after Salem. And during this panic, Masons were accused of anti Christian sentiments and taking part in secret rituals. There's a lot of similarities to the witchcraft accusations. And minor moral panics like this will continue into the 80s and 90s. Earlier, I said you need a high level of social anxiety to spark a panic. So, sociocultural factors that cause widespread anxiety and ultimately result in belief in satanic ritual abuse are really widespread by the 80s. People are being exposed to diverse lifestyles. Women were working outside the home in large numbers. Women no longer feel obliged to stay in unhealthy relationships. Family dynamics are changing. Divorce rates are increasing. The U.S. had also experienced a lot of economic insecurity, and poverty was increasing in the 80s. President Reagan would make the poor into social outcasts, explaining that social programs only increased poverty. Reagan really turned poverty into a personal failure instead of a social failure. In the 80s, there was an awakening to legitimate child abuse claims as well. Of course, child abuse had always been there, but it'd been hidden away. And suddenly, child abuse was a part of everyday conversation. And as TV came into every home in the U.S., reliance on media to interpret everyday experience is also coming into play. In response to social changes, there begins this religious fundamentalism where Americans are really beginning to dive deep into Christianity again. And this renewed deep dive into Christianity causes a sharing of symbols. There's a lot of talk of Satan and the devil. Rumors and gossip around the devil and worshiping him and satanic cults starts to pop up in communities around the U.S. Earlier, I also said that during the satanic panic, thousands of people would face accusation. We all know that the satanic panic came to an end, so how did the panic begin to wind down? Just like other panics, an enlightenment begins to happen as facts do not align with accusations. In the early 90s, Dr. Gail Goodman of UC Davis undertakes a large-scale survey that includes about 11,000 participants. Dr. Goodman's survey includes social workers, police officers, and others, all really credible people. And none of the participants report a genuine case of satanic ritual abuse. And then a reversal of the original panic process begins. Media picks up on the survey. People start to realize that they've made a big mistake. And over time, the whole panic comes to somewhat of a halt. So let's revisit Melvin Quinney. It turns out he's not a satanic cult leader. Quinney spent 8 years in jail and 12 years on probation. In the picture, you can see his son, John. He's the one with the hat on. When his father was exonerated, John would explain that his mother and therapist convinced him that he had witnessed satanic ritual activity and that John had been abused by his father. But whenever John would speak up and say that his father never hurt him, his therapist and mother would remind John that his father had programmed him to forget the abuse. Quinney's family was totally torn apart as a result of the false accusations. His children grew up in foster care, and of course, John suffers from great amounts of guilt. Today, Quinney says, "I was a victim, so what? My children, they were real victims." Here's Damien Eccles again. Eccles spent 17 years on death row for a crime that all of the evidence suggests he didn't commit. In addition, the families of the 3 murdered boys are unlikely to find the real murderer of their children. Most of the families of the murdered boys supported Eccles' release, and he was in fact released in 2011. One family member said, "To see Damien get out and have a normal life is a blessing from God." Some locals actually still believe Eccles is a satanic cult leader and a murderer, despite all of the evidence to the contrary. Damien will probably never be able to completely shake his label. Finally, back to Scott Waterhouse of Stanford. Waterhouse is still in Maine State Prison, where he'll likely be for the rest of his life. All of the evidence strongly supports his guilt. Waterhouse represents another danger of moral panic accusations. The connection of Waterhouse with Satanism came dangerously close to his release at one point. Waterhouse based an appeal on his connection to Satanism. He questioned his ability to receive a fair trial in York County due to the local headlines that connected him to Satanism. During his trial, the prosecutor said that Satanism is an important fact in the case. A part of what makes Waterhouse guilty is his Satanism. Ultimately, Waterhouse's appeal was unsuccessful. The judge in his case would say that Satanism was not a factor, and so the jury was not prejudiced against Waterhouse. The fact is that if Waterhouse really wanted to, he might be able to appeal his conviction today, as the judge's statement is at total odds with the prosecution's statement during his trial. It's impossible for me to say if he would be released or not. I think it's highly unlikely, but I think the danger is there, and if he was released or even retried, the satanic panic would cause another family more trauma. Wrapping up, moral panics have serious consequences. If we are offered a simple solution for a complex situation, we should consider it suspicious. We should support learning critical thinking skills in schools and colleges. The public needs to support education as a fundamental part of citizenship. Students need to learn how to use knowledge that they gain. They need to learn how to write essays and create presentations to share what they learn, and they need to learn how to receive feedback and criticism. One thing that concerns me is that today we are in the midst of some pretty serious socio-cultural anxiety. There's a lot of economic stress, wars, political anxiety is pretty much universal. People are having fewer children than ever, causing major changes to family dynamics, and we've had some warm-up panics, such as QAnon and anti-LGBTQ movements, which to me suggests that it seems like there's a real possibility for a new moral panic on a larger scale. I hope that my presentation will help you keep an eye out for the new panic when it does appear. Thank you for watching, and here are all of my works cited.